2,000 years of enmity, 4 layers of unyielding marble, over 6 feet of ancient mortar. These numbers represent far more than mere building materials. They are the veil concealing a profound secret, buried deep within the most fiercely contested building on the face of the earth. For millennia, mighty empires have sought to cast it to dust, and the fiercest of fires have raged to melt it away. Every attempt to erase it from existence seems to have forced humanity to face a fundamental paradox. How do we protect a sanctuary that the entire world is warring to possess? But then, in the year 2016, a moment of historic revelation came to pass. As the final layer was lifted by reverent hands, scientists stood in awe before a staggering truth. The structure resting beneath was no mere religious relic, nor a desolate tomb. It was a veritable time machine hewn from stone, with its genetic code from the very first century preserved perfectly intact. How could such a fragile structure stand resolute against thousands of years of relentless, brutal devastation? Today, we shall perform an unprecedented architectural dissection, peeling back the layers of antiquity to decipher what has truly kept this monument standing through the trials of time. And before we make our first cut, do not forget to hit that subscribe button to join our fellowship as we decode the greatest architectural mysteries in human history. To comprehend how this tomb has defied the ravages of time, we must journey back to the very beginning and examine the literal, geological bedrock upon which it was forged. In its genesis, this was no sacred sanctuary. It was merely a forsaken stone quarry resting just outside the gates of Jerusalem. Yet, this was no ordinary rock. The mountain itself was formed of Meliki limestone, an ancient Hebrew word meaning royal. This brilliant white stone possesses a miraculous physical trait. As it slumbers deep beneath the earth, it is porous and yields easily to the blade. But once hewn and exposed to the breath of the air, it hardens into something akin to steel. How then did an abandoned industrial quarry transform into a final resting place? Let us envision a 3-dimensional landscape of this very coordinate in the 1st century. As the lifeless stones were stripped away and the quarry exhausted, the sheer, blinding white limestone cliffs left behind formed a perfect, unbreachable natural wall. The people of ancient Jerusalem brought earth into this hollowed basin, planting seeds that would turn a barren wasteland into a lush, vibrant garden blooming amidst the jagged precipices. And it was within the faces of these very cliffs, standing sentinel over the garden, that they began to carve out new tombs. Now, let us dissect deeper into the cocon, the anatomical structure of a freshly hewn sepulchre. If you cast a light upon the inner walls of the cave, the hand-chiseled marks of 1st century stonemasons reveal themselves clearly. These strikes were neither random nor born of haste. To carve so deeply into the solid flank of the mountain, hollowing out a spacious burial chamber, demanded monumental labor and masterful craftsmanship. These deliberate, meticulous chisel marks bear witness to the stark social divide of the ancient world. They proclaim an undeniable truth. This was a tomb commissioned and crafted exclusively for the elite. It was by no means a shallow earthen grave meant for a commoner. It is this very luxury, the mastery over the royal stone, that laid the primeval foundation, forging a structure sturdy enough to withstand the terrifying cataclysms that were yet to come. Once the inner chamber was complete, we stepped back out to confront the fateful obstacle, the immense, rolling stone that sealed the entrance, known to the ancients as the Golal. Ordinary analyses often stop at a simple observation. This stone was very heavy. But from an architectural standpoint, that profoundly falls short. To truly decode this mechanism, we must look directly at its track, the groove in which it rested. Let us consider the physics. To heave a solid 1 to 2 ton boulder along its track, pushing it uphill against a deliberate incline to hermetically seal the tomb, the strength of how many men would that require? This was no mere door. It was a gravity-powered locking machine. It was engineered with flawless mechanical precision to ensure that no single man could ever shift it from the outside, and that moving it from the inside was absolutely impossible. Yet, this physical dead end was not the ultimate barrier. The pivotal question arises: why would Roman soldiers go to the lengths of sealing a 2-ton monolith with a mere cord of rope and melted wax? How could a fragile thread halt a mountain of stone? The truth is, the rope was never meant to hold back the rock. Psychologically and politically, this stands as the very first recorded architectural security lock in the history of Christianity. The wax stamped upon the stone bore the insignia of supreme authority. The Roman guard had transformed a mechanical barricade into a decree of death. That cord and wax delivered a chilling edict. Whosoever dared to sever that rope to touch the stone was no mere grave robber. They were declaring outright war against the entire Roman Empire. The stone was sealed not only by the gravitational might of the earth, but by the most absolute, terrifying human power the world had ever known. Yet, the sealed stone and the relentless vigil of the guards were far from the most brutal trials this site would face. Nearly a century later, the Roman Emperor Hadrian decreed the absolute eradication of every sacred trace from this hallowed ground. His strategy was clear and ruthless. Level the entire quarry, fill the basin, and erect a colossal temple dedicated to the goddess Venus directly on top of it. But what Hadrian could never have foreseen was that his act of burial would trigger a magnificent, unintended consequence. Through the lens of architecture and geophysics, he did not destroy the tomb at all. Instead, he unwittingly constructed for it a colossal, earthen sarcophagus. Thousands of tons of earth, stone, and rubble were poured down and compacted fiercely over the burial site. Let us analyze this crushing pressure. The sheer, immense mass of earth bearing down upon the cavern walls choked off and expelled every ounce of air from within. This absolute oxygen deprivation instantly paralyzed all microbial life, simultaneously bringing the natural process of erosion to a dead halt. The relentless hatred of the Roman Empire had accidentally engineered the ultimate, perfect insulation. For the next 200 years, the grand pagan temple of Venus above bore the brunt of the elements and human interference, transforming the tomb beneath into an impeccable specimen, preserved flawlessly in an anaerobic void. In an act of supreme, divine irony, the most ruthless attempt to erase its existence became the very cocoon that ensured its invulnerable survival. In the year 326 AD, a monumental upheaval came to pass. The Emperor Constantine decreed the total obliteration of Hadrian's Temple of Venus, clearing away thousands of tons of earth and debris to reclaim the holy site. The earthen sarcophagus was broken open, and the ancient tomb emerged, as intact as the day it was buried. Yet, the Byzantine architects now faced a daunting enigma. How does one glorify a rough-hewn cave buried deep within a jagged mountainside? This is the pivotal turning point that most modern analysts overlook. Constantine's master builders chose neither to build over the tomb nor to conceal it. Instead, they embarked upon an unprecedented, monumental geological surgery. Armed only with hand tools, they began to systematically carve away the entire surrounding mountain. Let us reconstruct this spectacle in 3 dimensions. You would witness thousands of laborers and stonemasons toiling relentlessly, day and night. They stripped away colossal swaths of the mountain, casting aside thousands of tons of excess limestone, meticulously chiseling from the outside in. Their grand design was to liberate the burial chamber from the cliff face, leaving behind only a single, sheer core of rock containing the inner sanctum, a true monolith. This grand surgical extraction wrought a visual miracle. From a dark cavern entombed in a hillside, the structure was sculpted into a monolithic stone arch, standing solitary and proud at the very center of a grand plaza. This was no mere feat of engineering. It was a destined metamorphosis, officially transfiguring a cavern of the underworld into the most radiant architectural monument of the ancient world. The great monolith stood unyielding through the centuries until it was confronted by a fury unlike any other in the year 1009. This time, the peril was born neither of nature nor the slow march of time, but from an absolute decree of annihilation issued by the Caliph al-Hakim. His command was absolute: no burial, no alterations, only total obliteration, until not one stone was left standing upon another. Al-Hakim's legions swarmed the holy site, armed with sledgehammers, pickaxes, and ravenous fire. They unleashed a frenzy of devastation upon the limestone. The roof and the vertical walls of the sepulchre were swiftly shattered into dust. Yet, as they plunged deeper into the inner sanctum, they were halted by a law of physics that defied the might of their hammers. Why could they not shatter the horizontal bedrock, the sacred burial shelf itself? Let us examine the mechanics of this impact. When a sledgehammer strikes a vertical wall, the kinetic force effortlessly pierces the limited thickness of the stone, fracturing its structure and bringing the wall crashing down. But against a monolithic horizontal stone bed, the narrative shifts entirely. As hundreds of hammer blows rained down from above, that immense kinetic energy could not shatter the surface. Instead, it was channeled directly down into the very bedrock of the earth. The stone borrowed the sheer mass of the planet itself to repel the blows of men. Unless the invaders could unearth the very foundation of the world beneath it, that burial shelf remained utterly invulnerable. Yet, this mechanical futility gave rise to a far more ruthless method of destruction: fire. They piled wood high and scorched the monolith, praying the intense heat would cause the stone to crumble. And it is here that we must examine these scars through the lens of modern geology. When the Jerusalem limestone, the royal Meliki stone, is subjected to blistering temperatures and then immediately assaulted by violent mechanical strikes, a violent phenomenon known as thermal shock takes hold. The crystalline structure within the stone is stretched to its absolute breaking point. Tens of thousands of microfractures fissure through the molecular lattice of the rock. It did not shatter, but it was profoundly wounded at an atomic level. The surface warped, discolored, and was branded with indelible scars. A millennium later, these scorched, agonizing fissures have become a holy grail for modern scientists. Under the gaze of an electron microscope, this interlaced web of thermal and kinetic trauma serves as the singular fingerprint of history. No sophisticated carving technology, no master of antiquities forgery, and no artificial weathering technique on Earth can replicate this natural, catastrophic alteration of the crystalline structure. In a stroke of ultimate, divine irony, the brutal scars inflicted by Al-Hakim now stand as the most authentic, incontrovertible proof of the original tomb's miraculous endurance. Nearly a century after the desolation left in Al-Hakim's wake, the Crusaders marched into Jerusalem. Standing before the primeval burial shelf, now deeply scarred and fractured by fire, they forged a vital architectural decision. They did not leave the sacred stone bare. Instead, They veiled it beneath a heavy slab of gray marble, engraved with the sign of the cross. At first glance, one might assume this was merely an act of symbolic reverence, a decorative shell meant to conceal the agonizing ruin of the holy relic. But in truth, why would they go to such arduous lengths to lay a second, massive stone, burying the original surface? The secret lay not in the costly marble itself, but in the binding agent between them, the ancient mortar. When modern experts analyzed this mortar, they unearthed a staggering revelation. This was no ordinary masonry mortar meant to fuse two surfaces together. It was a specialized compound, applied with deliberate, masterful calculation, designed to ensure that the marble slab above and the bedrock below would never physically touch. This sophisticated masonry engineered a microscopic air void, a micro gap, wedged perfectly between the two stones. And through the lens of physics, this was an absolute masterpiece. Air, by its very nature, is one of the most supreme thermal insulators known to man. The Crusaders had, whether by divine accident or brilliant design, forged a flawless thermal armor. The true might of this shield would not be called upon until centuries later. In the year 1808, a cataclysmic fire devoured the entire basilica. The inferno blazed with such terrifying ferocity that it melted lead, bringing the massive, overarching dome crashing down directly upon the tomb. That apocalyptic heat possessed more than enough power to calcify any exposed limestone, reducing it to mere quicklime. Yet, thanks to that gray marble shield and the microscopic breath of air trapped beneath it, the entirety of that devastating heat was halted and dissipated into the ether. The fragile, primeval rock resting in the dark had once again miraculously slipped from the very jaws of destruction. In the wake of the cataclysmic fire of 1808, the tomb's protective shell had to be resurrected once more in 1810. The structure we behold today is known as the edicule. To the naked eye, it appears magnificent and sweeping in its grandeur. Yet, beneath the anatomical gaze of an architect, the edicule is by no means a single monolithic edifice. In truth, it is a stone matryoshka doll, or more accurately, a colossal architectural onion, woven together from overlapping layers of epochs. The outermost shell, which modern pilgrims gaze upon and touch, is deeply steeped in 19th century Ottoman Baroque design. But resting immediately beneath that polished facade lie the medieval masonry remnants left behind by the Crusaders. And only by peeling away these successive veils of history do we finally reach the central core, the primeval, first-century bedrock. However, if you scrutinize photographs of the edicule spanning the last few decades, a jarring, intensely incongruous anomaly catches the eye. This holiest of monuments was constricted by a brutal, crude lattice of industrial steel girders. This is the British iron cradle, hastily installed by British authorities in 1947. Why must the most sacred sanctuary on earth brace itself within such a grotesque suit of iron armor? Was it to defend against the violent tremors of earthquakes or the devastating bombardments of war? Absolutely not. That iron cage was erected out of sheer architectural helplessness against the most silent yet terrifying destroyer of all, human breath. Let us calculate the simple physics. As millions of pilgrims crowd themselves into a burial chamber barely the size of a closet, millions of hushed breaths are exhaled into the dark. Moisture and carbon dioxide accumulate day by day, condensing upon the surfaces and seeping deep into the microscopic fissures. It irrevocably alters the chemical composition, dissolves the ancient mortar, and rots the porous limestone from within. The iron frame of 1947 stands as a bitter, poetic testament. The resilient tomb that had miraculously defied the thrust of swords and the fury of infernos was almost brought to its knees by the sheer, crushing weight of humanity's own devotion. The crude iron cage of 1947 was merely a desperate tourniquet, a stopgap measure to buy time against the grim grip of death. Deep within, the tomb was still dying. It was not until the year 2016 that a monumental architectural resurrection was finally set into motion, commanded by an elite vanguard of experts from the National Technical University of Athens. They stepped into this holiest of sanctuaries, armed not with sledgehammers or swords, but with laser scanners, ground-penetrating radar, and an extraordinary weapon of salvation: titanium bolts. To save the crumbling edifice without forsaking its centuries-old visage, these scientists performed the ultimate orthopedic surgery. With millimeter-perfect calculation, they drilled and drove ultra-resilient titanium pins through the tangled layers of history, anchoring them deep into the primeval bedrock within. These bolts operate as an invisible artificial skeleton. They silently draw the splintering strata back together, fortifying the entire structure into an impregnable monolith, invincible to the ravages of time. Yet, this grand surgery of 2016 achieved far more than merely reinforcing a monument. It answered the greatest question in history. As the marble slab was rolled away, scientists harvested the ancient mortar resting beneath and subjected it to OSL, optically stimulated luminescence, dating. In essence, this technology allows us to pinpoint the exact, fleeting moment those ancient minerals last saw the light of the sun before being sealed away in absolute darkness. The results returned sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. 345 AD. Why does this solitary number carry such earth-shattering weight? In the realm of forensics and law, there exists a cardinal rule known as the chain of custody. Evidence holds truth only if its lineage is unbroken and uncompromised. For centuries, skeptics have vehemently argued that the original tomb was utterly obliterated, asserting that the current site is nothing more than a relocated replica. But the OSL results crushed every shadow of a doubt. Unearthing mortar from the era of Constantine the Great is mathematically and historically akin to discovering the perfectly intact DNA of a long-lost ancestor. It stands as the most absolute, undeniable physical proof that this historical chain of custody was never shattered. Through the fires of war, the crushing weight of earth, and the hammers of destruction, that sacred core of rock has remained anchored to those exact coordinates, drawing a single, unbroken line straight through 2,000 years of human history. Piercing through the tangled, overlapping veils of time, we finally set foot within the absolute core of the entire structure, the ultimate inner sanctum. It is not majestic, it is not glorious. This central core is suffocatingly, impossibly confined, measuring barely 6 by 6 feet. And it is here, within this claustrophobic space, that we confront the greatest paradox of the entire monument. Look back upon the vast journey we have just undertaken. All the most priceless marble on earth. The solid gold oil lamps burning eternally through the night. The cutting-edge titanium armatures and the blood-soaked political pacts that drained the lifeblood of countless empires. All of this unimaginable grandeur, all of these frantic human endeavors, were ultimately forged to protect one single, solitary thing: an empty void. In conventional architecture, emptiness is a flaw, a defect demanding to be filled. But here, emptiness is the ultimate divine purpose. This silent sepulchre is, in truth, nothing more than a colossal, impenetrable stone frame, erected solely to hold a portrait that has long since vanished. Amidst the flickering shadows of candlelight, a profound question hangs heavy in the air. If these unyielding stones could speak, would they tell us of the one who once slumbered within their dark embrace? Or would they speak of the billions of souls who have poured out their faith over 2,000 years, transcending all boundaries of space and time, just to come here and seek Him?